Turn alongside the aforementioned talent, the man, the myth, society's Black Mirror, Mr. Travis Croft. How are you, sir?
Fine and dandy. I am reflecting the society's evil back at it. Yes, that's kind of been my jam since I was a teen. So finally, someone's giving me some recognition. I'm glad to hear it.
You're welcome. I expect the check in the post.
Yeah. It's going to be a good week. 136 is an auspicious number. You may not sound like much, but this might be the first River Phoenix film we've reviewed. I think it's the first River Phoenix film I've seen in a very long time.
Well, we did have Explorers, obviously.
Oh, we did. Sorry. Apart from that one. Apart from last week.
Last week doesn't count. It's not been put on podcast services yet.
But next week we have a treat for everyone. A real treat.
Oh, that's right.
The treat we literally talked about 2 minutes ago.
Hi, I'm George Turing. Welcome to episode 136. Where are we in the timeline? I can't remember anymore. Yeah, we are going to have a live in-person session. So, ladies and gentlemen, not only are you going to have the talent with me on screen, but you are probably going to have us complaining about ungodly biblical weather.
That's usually what happens.
It is pretty much the standard now.
I think this will be the first. I think we had one in-person show last year, if I recall correctly, in the last year's version of Electric Fried Brains or studios in Hawthorne East here in Melbourne.
Yeah, that would have been when Fried Brain Productions was being fumigated.
But that's one way to put it. Yes, that's a very good way of putting it. Quite easy. And I think it might have been that one that we did last year. Might have been the first in-person show we had done since 2019.
Quite possibly, which is nuts to think about. Frankly,
believe it or not, people, this show used to always happen in person.
Yeah, there was in the Wayback Machine. That was a regular thing.
It was I think we only started doing this when I want to say June, July of 2019 when logistics just kind of prevented the easy catch-ups we used to do when I lived in the northern suburbs of Melbourne, moved house into a significantly less convenient location. But as George noted, it was one attempt in, I want to say about this time, even about February of 2020. Just prior to the unspecified virus of unknown origin becoming a thing, I did try to drive up to the official home of Fried Brain Productions. It was only prevented from doing so by a literal biblical event of epic proportions, rain, trees, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
It was nuts. I literally had to do off-road to get to the pub to catch up with you because there was just trees in the way.
Trees on the road. I literally couldn't drive from the pub to your place.
For everyone who thinks, trees come down all the time, ladies and gentlemen, these are King Lake trees. These are the size of like a Buick just falling down across the road.
You don't want one to fall on you, and you sure as hell don't want to run into one.
Yeah.
So it's all of this is to say it doesn't happen often anymore, and it's something we're all we're excited to do it for you.
Yes,
and hopefully you enjoy it next week.
Exactly. So we are joined this week by Siren Divine. Hello. That's one of my friends from work. She's my work wife.
Hello, Siren. I'm sorry you have to work with George. I think it's a pain many have experienced before. But just keep it in mind. This too will pass.
Yes, except for you, apparently. You're the only one who continuously comes back of your own choice.
I've been working with you for 8 years, so it's my cross to bear.
It is true. You have been marked, and now you are property. That is it.
Property of the Fried Brain Productions Corporation.
Very nefarious.
Eventually, I will work my debt off. Lucky to say we've never had to work a shift together.
It's true. She is an assistant manager at a company that I will keep under wraps because whatever. And it just sounds more mysterious saying that. But yeah, she's a good one. She's all right.
You're very, very mysterious.
Yes. Well, she is an enigma. Yeah.
So,
Let's get on with the show.
If you're listening to the podcast later, by the way, you too can get a shout out like Siren Divine. We stream a show live from about 7 to 7:30 Australian Eastern Time, be it daylight or otherwise, on Twitch, on the YouTubes. Is it on
the
Facebook?
Facebooks?
The Facebook. If you if you'd like to jump on and have a chat with us, so like Siren Divine isn't doing now, please feel free. But yes, let's get on with the show. We've got a bit to cover this week.
We've got a few bits, yeah. So we've got our chain movie of the week this week, which is My Own Private Idaho, the Gus Van Sant written and directed journey of the self story, starring River Phoenix and Keanu Reeves in two of their more iconic roles, I would say. Certainly, it was an unusual year of 1991 for Keanu Reeves because he did this and Speed, I think it was, in the same year.
No, that was 95. I think this would have been Point Break.
Point Break, yes, thank you. Sorry, yes. So he still very much had the baby puppy fat on.
He was
Stop saying that I'm adorable. That's Siren privately messaging me. We have got me choosing the next movie, and got an interesting one. We have got updates on Peacemaker and the Book of Boba Fett. Travis is going to talk to us about Card Counter, as well as his thoughts on Ghostbusters Afterlife. And I am going to talk. After the gym on Friday, I had a new weight regime with more weight put on. I ended up Saturday, Sunday, and Monday basically walking around like a T-Rex because I couldn't move higher than this, and my arms could only get to about there. So I was just walking around like a weird, unusual T-Rex. So I figured, why not embrace that? I watched the Jurassic World movies and some of the Jurassic Park movies. So I'll have a little bit of a retrospect on that in advance of later this year's Jurassic World Evolution or whatever it's called. I can't remember. Oh, Domination. As well as actually one of Siren Divine's favorite movie franchises, Underworld. So,
I'm sorry. The first thing I was going to say was, do you even lift, bro?
I do, and it hurts.
If lifting weights is enough to drive one to watch Underworld, then I should quit going to the gym. Even Kate Beckinsale in a skin-tight outfit wasn't enough to save those films.
Well, I will have thoughts on that.
Very good. I'm looking forward to them. Should we start with what we should probably start with most weeks? It's a chain film.
Why not? Yeah, let's start with My Own Private Idaho. So, let me just get back to the right page here.
Noted, this is the 1991 IMDb, so it's a drama. Two best friends living on the streets of Portland as hustlers embark on a journey of self-discovery and find their relationships stumbling along the way. That's a fairly brief synopsis. A better one might be Mike Waters lives on the street and befriends a somewhat older and streetwise Scott Favor, who shows him what is necessary to survive. Waters suffers from narcolepsy and can fall asleep at any moment and in almost any circumstance. Favor comes from a rich family and is rebelling against his own background. They travel together extensively. Waters is driven by the need to find his biological mother and spend time in Italy. Later in life, however, Favor has joined mainstream society and has little time for his old friend. That's, again, abridged. This stars, as you note, the aforementioned River Phoenix as Mike Waters, Keanu Reeves as Scott Favor. Really, a few character actors in here that I wasn't overly familiar with. If you have a really recognizable names here, Flea of Red Hot Chili Peppers fame as Bud, and Udo Kier as Hans. So looking through his IMDb page, I'm like, I know this guy's face, but I can't exactly say from where. He's in a lot of different stuff. My personal favorite was Iron Sky, the Nazis on the Moon movie.
I remember that, yeah.
Other than that, there's not a lot of big name stars in here. It's directed and written by Gus Van Sant, who became a big deal later in the 90s. He, of course, really struck gold with Good Will Hunting and the glorious shot-for-shot remake of Psycho. I was joking.
Completely unnecessary.
It's also very loosely based on a couple of Shakespeare plays. IMDb credits Henry IV, but I think there's a couple others in there he's pulled inspiration from as well.
Well, looking at some of the trivia about the movie, this is an amalgamation of 3 different movie ideas that he had, and he just kind of smudged them into one and resulted
And can
in
I
this.
just say, it shows.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I have not seen this movie before this. It was one that was regularly told to me through my acting course. Oh yeah, watch this because it's a powerhouse performances, all of this stuff. It's a weird fucking movie. They have that Shakespearean dialect to it, which maybe it's ahead of its time considering the success of Romeo and Juliet that we've both talked about, really appreciating as a modernization of the Bard. But it just seemed so weird and very in contrast to everything that the story was trying to portray. And something that was noted in the trivia that I read was members of the gay community said that they didn't like the movie until it got to the somewhat famous campsite sequence between just River and Keanu, where he's just having this very open, honest conversation about loving Scott. And it's the first time in the movie where the homosexual characters are not depicted as victims or kind of unfortunate bystanders of disastrous things going on in other people's lives. There's those very candid kind of shots of them in the cafe, just some of them talking about being raped and things like that. And it's very blasé spoken in the time, but it also
Very matter of fact. Oh yeah, and this horrible thing happened to me on one of my first, dates, as they call them. I kind of wondered in that scene if those people were real. Street
well, apparently, one or two of them were,
which doesn't surprise me because it kind of struck me as almost documentary-ish, and in a way, that is a little bit ahead of its time. It's the kind of thing that Chloe Zhao has done more recently in a film like Nomadland, where she cast real van dwellers alongside Frances McDormand, and it was quite she won an Oscar. It was effective. It was also boring. But to actually incorporate that kind of documentary sort of style footage or a documentary style scene into a narrative film was probably quite revolutionary in 1991.
Yeah, it's there's a lot stylistically in this that has, I feel like, kind of been replicated and refined over the time, like the modernization of Shakespeare. It is now, you think of there's a lot of different Shakespearean adaptations that have happened. We talked about them last week a little bit, of the going into the 90s with the rom-com using Shakespeare as a base for it. You think about Romeo and Juliet. You think
10 Things I Hate About You.
10 Things I Hate About You, the tragedy of Macbeth that you talked about on Apple TV the other week.
I think there was a very modern version of Othello around about 2000, 2001.
Yeah, with Hartnett. Yeah.
It was the thing to do.
Yeah, and then that sort of like pseudo documentary thing. You talked about Chloe Zhao, and but at the same time, it's a very stark movie. It's very, very minimal, almost to the point of part of it kind of felt a little bit dogmatic and early Lars von Trier-ish, especially I guess spoilers at the end where they're at the funeral. There's Scott is attending the funeral of his father, and just off in the distance he sees the group that he used to hang with all having their own funeral, and it's very raw and primal in its kind of whoa and then elation and just letting out all of these emotions. And it very much felt like an early Lars von Trier, just go with it kind of feel. It's weird.
I gotta be honest, I'm not overly familiar with Lars von Trier, but you're right. This is indie filmmaking 90s style. When I guess they got by on a significantly smaller budget, and doing so was significantly harder. And Van Sant's a celebrated director now. I think this is a film, though, that relies heavily on its performances, particularly the central performances of River Phoenix, Mike, and Keanu Reeves as Scott.
Mhm.
And he happened to luck onto two iconic stars
Mm.
at the height of their beauty and
Mhm.
their power, really, in Hollywood in a way. Like
Yeah.
this film is almost probably more famous now because River died young. But they are incredibly beautiful young men
Mhm.
in a fairly challenging role and playing gay in the
Mhm.
early 90s,
Yeah.
having, was probably a very challenging thing. We talked about it in Reality Bites a few weeks ago that, we only had that one gay character there who comes out of a closet, but he's very much a sidelined minor
Mm.
character who's very much a B story against
Mhm.
the A story of Winona Ryder and Ethan Hawke. This whole film is about some pretty challenging topics for early 90s cinema. And while I would hesitate to call Keanu Reeves Scott gay, I don't think
Mm.
he is gay.
Yeah.
As he sort of noted in that scene at the end where he says, "I don't think a man can love another man."
Mm.
Whereas River Phoenix, I think in that scene would actually, you probably come and say, yes, he is gay, and not a major or a
Mm.
fairly notable American film to come out. We have a gay main character, and talk about
Mhm.
gay hustlers is a pretty, or at least street hustlers who engage in gay sex is a pretty challenging film to happen. So as you sort of said, it's an iconic role for two beautiful young men at the height of their powers that hold up, I think, a pretty weak film.
Yeah.
I had problems with this film.
I
As
did
you
too.
noted, the Shakespearean link is actually incredibly obvious. I should note I'd not seen this film before this week either. So the film's almost cut. The film's almost in segments. That's what I talked about, where you can see the joins.
Yeah.
Really, obviously, you can see the joins. It's like 2 or 3 different films. You know what it reminded me of? From Dusk Till Dawn, in a way. Remember from Dusk Till Dawn when it first came
Yeah.
out? You're like, okay, this is a Tarantino road movie. Okay, it's a vampire movie. Um, like that was
Yeah.
a really weird right turn that film took.
But
Um,
the thing with, at least with Dusk Till Dawn, is it kind of, while it did change gears and genres very abruptly, it kept with them for quite a while. Whereas with this one, he tries to merge them from one to another,
It
and
goes
it
back
just
and
ends up
forth. Like once you're right, once
yeah,
Russell Dawn made its turn, it stayed on that road for the rest of the film. So
yeah,
if we have the sequences in not just Portland, but Seattle as well, I think it's set at points
mm,
where we catch the guys hanging around with the group of street hustlers they hang with, including their leader, loosely speaking, Bob,
yeah,
and they're in an abandoned hotel or a virtually abandoned hotel they're living. And in their sort of shenanigans they get up to, including robbing people and
mm-hmm,
such. All that dialogue is Shakespearean-esque,
yeah,
and I actually don't know that's actually the dialogue from it, actual review, a la
mm,
Romeo plus Juliet, which is actually the dialogue from the play. If
mm,
these are lifted and shifted lines from something like Henry IV, Henry V, but it's loosely based on, or it's just inspired by,
yeah,
I don't know, but you can't escape. Even if I didn't know it was Shakespearean from reading this, I would have known it because it's so obvious.
mm-hmm,
And
mm,
okay, you're like, okay, this is interesting. This is fine. You're doing again. This is revolutionary in 1991, but now not so much.
yeah,
But then we cut to their scenes like you mentioned, the sort of face-to-face documentary style interviews with the hustlers and the horrible experiences they've had, and then we
mm,
cut to the road trip section of a film
yeah,
where that Shakespearean dialogue is gone. It's
yeah,
just not there. And then we cut back later, and it's back again.
yeah,
So it's almost like Shakespeare exists in Portland and Seattle, but when they go out west to the aforementioned Idaho,
yeah.
looking for things, or when they go to Italy, no one speaks Shakespeareanly there. And it's like I don't understand. Mate, was there a deliberate choice to say what are you trying to say by saying people speak the film communicates this way here, but it communicates differently everywhere else?
I kind of just wrote it off in my own mind as just part of the dressing that the character Bob likes to have. They have this kind of breakdown of Bob where they scare the shit out of them and then make him just kind of talk and talk and talk and kind of go, oh, there were 2 men, there were 4 men, there were 9 men, there were 11 men, and they keep on pointing it all out. And every time Bob is on screen, it's almost like he is royalty. He's sitting essentially in a throne, or these like deep red colored clothes and things like that kind of represent some air of royalty and high society amongst, he's the king of the street urchins kind of thing, which I kind of wrote it off as just almost like language of court. But at the same time, it just was so jarring, suddenly going from that to a weird medley of young Easy Riders crossed with a touch of Withnail and I.
A bit of that, yeah.
It was just weird.
And almost a bit like, what was it was that film with Tim Roth in it, where Rubenstein and are dead.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
I remember I saw that with housemates of mine when they were very stoned back once upon a time. Kind of like Shakespearean, but winking at the audience at the same time. And we have our own very own Russian bot who's in the chat. So I do speak a little Russian, but I can't read that. So good evening to you, sir. If it wasn't the bots, where would we be? We are polite to the bots. We owe our existence. Most of our subscribers are bots. Yeah. Some of my favorite people are bots.
5 out of 7 bots approve of Armchair Producers.
Exactly. So I found it actually, but I also not much happens in this film. It's a very sedate pace. It sort of sets. It's very talky, and it's not particularly uplifting at the same time. It has no need to be uplifting. It's not telling a particularly happy story, but it really slows to a snail's pace at a few times in the film, and I found it hard to keep engaged.
Yeah, the one thing that I really kind of shocked me when it happened the first time, and then they repeated it, was how they did the sex scenes. Those kind of frozen tableaus instead of just showing slow motion or anything like that. It was a really unique, interesting way of portraying sexual interaction, and I actually approved of it. I thought it was quite intelligent and a very clever way of getting that element of visual sex into a movie that it was technically under the Disney banner because it was released by New Line Cinemas later on and things like that. It was like it's a weird movie for Disney to kind of go, oh yeah.
We know they've always been big on challenging social issues, Disney. Yeah, right.
Don't say something.
I found them odd, and I don't know what he was going for with that. I thought that was just another pretentious, stylized choice that didn't really do anything for the film besides look cool.
Yeah, well, that's it. It was an interesting technical add to the movie, but it didn't actually add to the movie. It just further muddied the thematics of the whole thing because it's like, okay, this is just weird. It's interesting, but it doesn't add anything.
Interesting. I think there was a trivia item here, but that took a very, very long time to do some of those scenes, and that was very, very cold. And good old Keanu, he committed.
Yeah.
Here we go. Rivet Phoenix talked about the sex scene between Keanu Reeves and Kiara. Keanu was real naked with a beautiful Kiara. That scene was really a drag. He was having a great time with his girl, but it was freezing cold and they were dying. So I think they were more worried about the temperature than the nudity. That took 5 hours.
Oh.
That's harsh. I think Chiara Caselli would be very familiar with the concept of shrinkage after that. No disrespect to Keanu. I'm no disrespect to him. I'm sure he's doing fine.
You'd hope so.
My favorite scene of the film actually was when they were all. It was a very interesting scene where we were all on covers of gay pornographic magazines and having a conversation with each other. If nothing else from a technical aspect, because if you look at it and go, oh, that looks really good for 1991, and then you realize it was practical special effects. They were standing behind perspex screens without crap painted on them because they couldn't afford special effects.
Yeah, I thought that was just ingenuity at its peak. Really, really well done. It looks really good. But again, overall, it kind of set this weird fairy tale kind of theme to it, or this flight of fancy that nothing remotely like it gets picked up.
No, it doesn't happen again. This film is very grounded for the rest of it, very gritty. Yeah. But then we've got this almost Lynchian, dream sequence. I thought it looked beautiful. It looked incredible, and I enjoyed watching it.
Yeah,
and I enjoyed the interplay between the characters in that setting. But it didn't have. There was nothing else in this film that was in a similar vein. I am really confused about what he was trying to do with this film. I go back to it again. It really feels like three ideas smooshed together to make a feature, and really can't really understand. Apart from two incredibly beautiful young men at the height of their, youth, I don't understand why this film is so iconic. I really don't.
It was just because of exposure of these two high-profile actors being in what at the time got labeled as a gay movie, and it wasn't exactly a common thing or financially popular thing to make your movie about, and yet it got two of the biggest, hottest young actors in Hollywood involved. It's like, that's going to draw some attention, and it for better or worse, it pushes the gay button, which is still to this day, it is underrepresented overall, especially in Hollywood. And I wonder if that happened, because it does, when talking with other people in cinematography and things like that, it kind of has now been superseded by the next big gay movie to really make it big, which was Brokeback Mountain.
It did remind me of, especially the fire, the campfire scene did kind of remind me a little bit of Brokeback Mountain. But you're right. I mean, that was only 2007, 2008, Brokeback Mountain, and that's quite it's 14 years ago. 2005. Good Lord, how was it that long ago? But that was 14 years later, and that was still pretty controversial. It had two hot, very, very hot stars in Jake Gyllenhaal and Keith Ledger. Playing homosexual characters, and even then that was 17 years ago. Fucking hell. But that was quite controversial at the time. But I think we've come a long way from there.
I think so too.
Certainly, I am not saying we need where we need to be. We're not at the final destination, and as you noted, representation is still poor. But we have made progress. I think maybe it's the thing. Again, I'm not gay. We're fair to say we are not gay, so we're not part of the LGBTIQ community. So I probably shouldn't be saying that, because you can come back to me and go, actually, you know what? There's still this problem, that problem, that problem. But I just say from 1991, you would hope we made progress, and 30 years later, and we have. Whereas if you made this film today with Timothy Chalamet would be one of them, and somebody else. I don't think there'd be anywhere near something like that. I don't think there'd be anywhere near a controversy for it being a gay film, but it was.
Even to that point, if you were to do that, you could actually see some negative. It's like, this Oscar bait.
Pretty much, or it's almost come the other way now. It's like, why are there always gay characters in my movies now? We had a homosexual character in The Eternals. I believe Valkyrie is also pansexual, if I'm not mistaken. So we have LGBT characters in the biggest franchise of films the universe has ever known. So people, it's come a long way, is what I would say, and I think that's a good thing. And maybe this film is a film that needed to happen to get that, as part of that fight, and in which case, good luck to you. But maybe, and also maybe it hasn't aged well. Maybe it's just a case of the stuff that was shocking in 1991, 92 is just a bit blasé in 2022. And maybe you needed that shock and awe to kind of, engage you in the story in a way that I didn't find engaging.
I do wonder, I think you're probably right in that regard, and I also wonder if this is kind of one of those seed movies where it was because of the attention that it got at the time, young filmmakers and writers that are now actually working, they use this as like, oh wow, you can do that sort of stuff. That's cool, and it was an inspiration for people.
I've heard it said that maybe this film inspired someone like Baz Luhrmann with that Romeo plus Juliet film he made 5 years after this. I don't know if that's true at all. I haven't got a source. I haven't seen it cited anywhere, but it was just a suggestion that as a very modern, because this is a very 90s film as well.
Oh yeah,
as a very modern film. Maybe the idea of incorporating, Shakespearean language into a more modern setting. Well, he's not exactly the first person to do that, but maybe that was something that inspired Baz Luhrmann a few years later.
Yeah.
I'm glad I've seen it now. I actually had a dinner with a friend this evening after work and before the show, and I was talking, and somehow, despite the fact that obviously I didn't love this film, I still managed to convince my friend Susie to actually go away and watch it. So,
there you go.
If you haven't seen it, I think I would recommend watching it. I think it's worth seeing, if nothing else. It does say to me that we lost a tremendous talent when River Phoenix passed away. I would have what he would have done with his career. I mean, we see his brother is also an incredible star. What a joy it would have been to have seen those two guys in a movie together.
Can you imagine a movie with River Phoenix and Heath Ledger?
Yeah.
Boom. Boom.
I mean, yeah, he would have achieved great things. There was talk, he was the next James Dean and doing keeping him that he died young.
Yeah.
But he was a tremendous talent, and what a shame he passed away at the young age of 23.
Yeah. But now it is my turn to take the reins.
Keys.
And I said it before that I'm going to take us to a little bit of an unusual place. I'm going to follow Chiara Caselli, who ended up being Scott's wife that he met in Italy. She was in the 2002 movie Ripley's Game, which is a dying man in need of money is persuaded to assassinate a European crime boss. Now, this is an interesting movie because it's a pseudo sequel to The Talented Mr. Ripley, as it does follow on the character of Tom Ripley, played in this movie by one classic, John Malkovich. It also stars DeGray Scott, Race Winston, Lena Headey, and not too many other big name stars, certainly in English, Australian, American, because it largely takes place in Europe, so there's a lot of European stars in there. It is directed by one Liliana Cavani, who I don't think I know any more of her work either. So it's just an interesting one that, it looks like she's best known for a lot of international stuff.
And Italian films. I've never saw the first Talented Mr. Ripley, so I'll be curious to see if it's a film I needed to have seen and to see the sequel, to see the soft sequel.
I have seen this before, but I really don't remember it. So it's going to be a whole new take for me. But that is our link in the chain for this week. It is going to be Ripley's Game.
Good choice. It's going to be a little bit left of center.
Yeah. I figured we've been playing it relatively safe and explanation-wise, so I figured why not do something a little unusual.
Okay, now, I would like to move on and just talk a little bit about Ghostbusters Afterlife, because you saw it a while ago, and we did get your take on things. And I don't 100% remember exactly. We try to keep it spoiler-free. But so now I can. We can actually. So I think we can fair to go. Are we going to go full spoiler cast here? Because It's been out, I think, in the States for a couple of months. It's been out here for a month or two.
Spoilers warning.
I think it's coming out on DVD any day now in the States, which means it'll be on torrent services before you know it. So I think your time, if you haven't seen it by now, I think, at least we give you a warning. You can turn off.
Yep.
It says sponsors, not spoilers.
No spoilers.
Yes. They both start with S.
Yeah, boy.
So I actually went to the theater yesterday to see this. So I think personally we've kept it out of it. I mean, I don't know why it didn't go onto a streaming service somewhere way faster than this, but I guess they were hoping to get their money back from the theaters. But it was pretty empty yesterday. So this is technically, I guess, well, if I'm covering stuff that George already said a couple of weeks ago, I apologize. I don't remember what we did before we started the show, let alone 2 weeks ago.
You do something once and everyone wants to copy it.
This film basically ticks up after Ghostbusters 2 in a way, really. Well, there's no direct link from Ghostbusters 2. I don't really reference it directly. There's some Easter eggs. But it essentially ignores the reprehensible 2016 Paul Feig film. And unfortunately, I did try thinking to myself while I was watching, like, I shouldn't compare it too much to the Feig film, but I'm going to, because there's just too much in here that I guess there's just too many things this film does that film shouldn't have done. So when a single mom and her 2 kids arrive in a small town to discover their connection to the original Ghostbusters and the secret legacy their grandfather left behind. So that grandfather is Egon Spengler, the late Harold Ramis's character, who obviously, being late, couldn't be in this. And we thought for a long time that that was going to doom the Ghostbusters franchise forever. But this picks it up pretty well. So we have Carrie Coon as Carly, and she is the single mother to Finn Wolfhard's Trevor and McKenna Grace's Phoebe. They're being evicted from their apartment in a city somewhere, and they've just inherited the property of their grandfather, who Carrie Coon's father, who she barely knew. The kids have never met. They have nowhere else to go but this abandoned farmhouse in the middle of a field in the middle of nowhere. So they essentially move out there because they have nowhere else to go. In doing so, we have Finn Wolfhard's Trevor, who is kind of more interested in getting laid. He meets Celeste Connor's Lucky, who works at a local diner. He gets a job there. That seems to be his main thrust. McKenna Grace's Phoebe is very kind of socially awkward, but really into science, and she really starts to explore the space that she's in now and discovers a trap, an old ghost trap, which she takes to school, where it is recognized by her science teacher, played by Paul Rudd's Gary Gruberson. She and her friend, played by Logan Kim, who's named Podcast, which is an awesome name for a kid, by the way. He's got a great kid. I need one of them. And they discover that, start to discover, as we sort of know, the Ghostbusters heritage she has in her family, and that there's some funky shit going on in this town. It turns out that most of the town was owned by Ivo Shandor, who is the guy who built the building in the original Ghostbusters. He's mentioned by name at least once or twice. And he owned a mine in this small town where he smelted the material that they made the girders out of that were in the building in the first Ghostbusters, which is a nice little connection. And there's some funky shit going on in this town to do with ghosts. So I felt I was kind of a bit torn on parts of this film. I think for the most part it was pretty well done. It was entertaining. It was fan service on fan service on fan service. This was The Force Awakens of the Ghostbusters franchise, the film that they had. This is Sony's apology to the fans after the last one. But it's, I think, nowhere near as derivative as The Force Awakens was. It has its moments, but it's not as derivative. It is directed by Jason Reitman, who I'm a big fan of. I did shake his hand once at MIF. That's my claim to fame. his first feature was Sheridan Myth. It was Thank You for Smoking.
Great
I
film.
think he's made a number of really good films. Thank You for Smoking, Up in the Air, Juno, Young Adult. He can seriously direct. He's a very talented guy. The thing is, though, this is not the kind of film he usually does. It's the kind of film his dad did a lot better than him. Sort of action comedies was more Ivan Reitman's sweet spot. Whereas, how would I describe him? He kind of does indie-ish coming of age films reasonably well. And I mean, well, Young Adult wasn't coming of age, but sweet, interesting indie films about lonely people. I think.
Every one of his movies should have Joseph Gordon-Levitt in it.
I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet. So I found myself halfway through going, wow, it's really interesting because you can kind of see that Jason Reitman layer on top of the Ivan Reitman stuff, because he obviously he's dead pretty well, and he's pulling some pretty familiar levers and some pretty familiar tricks. We've sort of seen it. The film structure is fairly similar to the original Ghostbusters film in a sense. But what I liked about it, it had that film, that Jason Reitman layer on it, in a sense of we meet this group of young people who are in an unusual situation, obviously, and it's a coming of age moment for them. This is, a kind of the growing relationship between Trevor and Lucky, and, their moments together, and Phoebe and Podcast. Well, there's no romantic relationship, but her finding a friend, and as a lonely, socially awkward character, finding someone who they click with he does that kind of thing well, even through the very brief touched on relationship that was growing between Callie and Gruberson. Again, he's just something he doesn't just do young people. One of the things I like Reitman did very well in Young Adult was he has a sort of an almost middle-aged Shelley Theron going back to her hometown as a published writer, and trying to get back together with the guy she liked in high school and stuff. She says he's a very cynical and odd character, and I really like that. And again, he's kind of got those characters. Callie's a fairly cynical character here.
Oh yeah, she's jaded beyond belief.
And Gruberson pretty much is as well. One of the few laughs I got in the film, this is a very dry comedy, this film, was he basically, his way of managing the class in summer school was to put on horrible 80s horror films for them, including Cujo and Child's Play, and just go into the next room and do his own work and just play with the kids. And I laughed very hard at that. I thought that was funny. So in a way, he's kind of jaded and cynical about life as well. Yeah. And I like that he does these jaded, cynical characters very well. And so I found those relationships really nice, really believable. And that was nicely built on top of the existing Ghostbusters structure that was still there from last time. But we had the same score pretty much.
And just as a note on that, the score was just perfectly used, that it sent those tingles down your spine at the appropriate times, when even just little audio nods of ghosts, or the traps opening up, or this the proton packs turning on, and that kind of noise.
This film goes to show that he gets it. He gets it. Jason Reitman gets it. Yeah. I mean, I've seen some people criticize this, going, "Oh, it's just a retread of Ghostbusters." I'm like, yeah, if you look under the surface, it's the same. Like I said, the same parts of it, but it's got a new hat. It wasn't as forced as something like The Force Awakens, which you're being slapped around the face, going, "Remember this? Remember this? This is cool,"
Or the Matrix Resurrections.
Yes, well, except remember going, the Matrix Resurrections did it a little bit differently, but yeah, it was trying to, play back those moments again in a different way, but they were there. This one, it has a different way of doing it in a sense. You guys, the same beats are there, I suppose, but I felt like it did it in a different enough way to keep it interesting for me. But the sound, the importance of sound. Imagine if Disney had done the sequels to Star Wars, and they changed the sound of the blaster rifles that the stormtroopers shoot. Instantly noticeable, right? That sound is iconic. Not just the music, John Williams' score. The sound of a blasters is iconic. The sound of a speeder bike is iconic. The sound of a lightsaber switching on is iconic. You can't just change these things, or ignore them. The sound cues in every way just as important as the music and the story elements and stuff like that. And so he gets this. So sound is a very important element here, and he really, really revels in it. And these are the fan service moments.
Yeah. And like I was saying about like that tingle factor from the music cues, from the sound cues, he intelligently used it to elicit a response for something that was happening on screen as well. So it further heightened your emotional engagement and attachment to it. Like the first time that Finn's character like uncloaks Ecto 1, it's like and just getting that little touch of music in there, even though it's beaten up to sin, it's a trash pile more than we've ever seen it before. I just felt that connection, and it wasn't just straight up, hey, remember this, look at this, remember this. It was like, look at this thing that is aged. You have fond memories of this. You want to build that. And it actually kind of got me into the mindset of Finn as he was like, okay, I can bring you back. It was awesome. It also falls into the tagline of the movie, Afterlife. And that is a big theme for the story here. Not only, it's ghosts in the afterlife, but what happens after these monumental moments, such as how the original Ghostbusters team break down. We hear the relationships between them break down and become very sour and bitter, and they've had to move on. It's a variation of Afterlife. The mum reconnecting with an estranged father, the grandkids. Everything is all about this moving on from a traumatic moment, and it plays it really well. Intelligent use of the theme.
I agree with all that. Now, I did have some problems with this film, though. Spoiler alert. Big time spoiler. It's probably out and about.
Like
the original cast do make an appearance. The rest of the original cast make an appearance at the end. They do just sort of turn up out of nowhere and help them fight the big bad at the end of the film. I was like, yeah, you could have spent a little bit more time on that. Like, obviously I was waiting for it to happen.
Yeah.
But like, I was like, fine, one extra scene. There's a good scene actually at one point where Phoebe contacts Ray in the occult bookstore and gets his interest, and he lets him know that Egon's dead and that the ghosts are coming back or something of that nature. One extra scene at the end of that could have been enough. Like him hanging up and him picking up the phone and going Venkman and cut there. Then we know Ray's planning on something, and it's foreshadowing. They foreshadowed nothing. They just turned up. Which it's forgivable, but I was like,
for the time of 30 seconds, it would have made just enough of a difference.
The whole scene also where the ghost of Egon sort of comes back and helps Phoebe hold the proton pack as she's shooting Gozer, and then hangs around to give a thumbs up, to give a little acknowledgement to the rest of the Ghostbusters and hug his daughter. And I've heard some people say how that was really heartwarming and touching, and I was like, oh, you're a simp. Like, I mean, seriously, that was it seemed really saccharine to me, really saccharine and kind of manipulative. Like, okay, I get it, right? Like,
I liked it, but it went for too long. It ended up becoming a Hallmark moment, and it's like it should have just been that momentary scene where you just get the reaction of the surviving Ghostbusters just seeing and just their response, rather than this drawn out sequence. They didn't need it to be too long. They could have cut that down and used that to reintroduce the original trilogy,
So those are some of my problems with it. And that was like, oh gosh, you're really trying to manipulate my emotions now. And as a result, I felt nothing, because it's like, I can see exactly what you're doing. It's lame and it's not going to work.
You cold, heartless bastard.
I am a cold, heartless bastard. I was just looking there going, Bill Murray looked like he couldn't have given two fucks about being in this film.
That's just the way that his jowls are now.
It also made me think, come on, man, like you should have done this 15 years ago. 15 years ago, this would have been you guys would have done something good.
Dan Aykroyd, bless him, he's tried.
It was all down to Bill Murray. He didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
But what I didn't like that scene with the Ghostbusters at the end, we didn't dislike it. It was like, I acknowledge it could have been done better. The other thing the other thing I didn't like was the tiny marshmallow men. I thought that was stupid.
I thought it was fun, but it was the biggest part of the whole movie that didn't really fit. Like we were talking about it with My Own Private Idaho. That was in its if they had kind of gone more heavy on the physical comedy in the whole movie, yeah, it might have fit in a little bit more, but it didn't make any sense. I don't understand why there were suddenly tons of them everywhere. I mean, maybe if we had seen sort of like just a little bit of them kind of just all piling on top of each other and slowly becoming a big thing with this unfulfilled threat of the giant Stay Puft Marshmallow is going to come back at some point, but they defeat Gozer before that happens or something like that. Maybe, but it sells a lot of Funko Pops.
Well, it might have done if anyone went and saw this film, but it felt like an idea that was left over from a 2016 film, frankly, to me. It would have made more sense.
The look of it as well.
It would have made more sense in that film than this one. But let's just say, though, to come back to the inevitable comparisons between that and this, because I think they'll be there. I don't know who made the bad decisions that made 2016 what it was. Obviously, Paul Feig takes his share of the blame. I don't know if he wrote that by himself. I have a feeling he wrote it with somebody else.
Yeah.
But I think he had a hand in the script. And I think at the end of the day, he had pretty much full creative control, if I recall correctly. That was kind of his condition of doing that. So he takes his lion's share of the blame for what that became. But he's a talented filmmaker. Like he's made, Spy was funny. The Bridesmaids was very funny. The guy knows what he's doing. So but this is the first franchise film he made. I don't understand who made the decision about that this film was going to be not a sequel. Like, remember one of the main problems of this film was, what is this? Is it a sequel? Is it a reboot? Is it a remake? It wasn't sure. Remember the first trailer came out and said, 30 years ago, 4 scientists saved New York. And
everything disappeared.
But then, they never mentioned the original Ghostbusters again in the film. And the original, did they or didn't they? I can't remember, but the original Ghostbusters were in it, but they were different characters, and you're like, what? I mean, even if they were existing in a universe where the original Ghostbusters happened, they really needed to explain what had happened subsequently, which Afterlife does. This is a universe where those films happened, and at least the first one happened. They didn't talk about the Statue of Liberty walking. They did talk about those films, and they acknowledged that nothing had happened for a long time. That's kind of why people had forgotten about them. But the 2016 film just kind of was really weird. Kind of, was it a reboot? Was it a remake? We don't know.
I think it was just a perfect medley of bad choices that on paper should have been good.
I'm not even going to go into the fact of being women or anything like that, because I've said many times, at least 3 of them I know to be extraordinarily talented comic actors. I don't know anything about Leslie Jones. Sorry, I can't comment on her. But the other 3, they know what they're doing. So I can only put this down to the script. And I don't want to get too deep into this because I'll be here all day. But
we've put the knives into Ghostbusters answer the call enough.
But the fact that this film, having the Ghostbusters turn up at the end, was very much a pass the torch moment.
Yes.
It's a very obvious pass the torch moment. We've now got, Finn, we got Phoebe. What this film could, I found myself thinking while I was on, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you do that? They were obviously prepared to be in the film.
Yeah.
I don't know if there was, I think it was some sort of Bill Murray would only be in it if he couldn't be Venkman or something. I'm like, obviously, you twist the guy's arm enough, he would have done it because he did this. Yeah. So why didn't you do that? Why wouldn't they say that stupid first scene, but it wasn't funny with the ghost in the mansion? Why didn't you have
that was the funniest part. The tour guide.
but it still wasn't very good. But why hadn't there a scene where we see the original Ghostbusters turn up and they fight a ghost or something, but one of them dies or they get crippled or they get something happens, and Kristen Wiig is Ray's daughter or something like that, or
no, they didn't even need any of that. Let's be honest. They didn't need the characters. If the actors are going to come in and do cameos, then why the fuck did they have those characters? They should.
Well, that was bad again because he made you think, why isn't that's Venkman? Why isn't he playing Venkman?
Towards the end of the movie, they could have just very simply just had fucking Dan Aykroyd. Only Dan Aykroyd could have just turned up and said, like, okay, you think this is new stuff? You clearly haven't checked the internet, which would have also validated their fucking moment where they said, like, oh, don't look at the comments, which was blatantly an in-joke on the production of that movie anyway. But
I just found myself thinking about it. This film Afterlife passes a torch. Which is what, if you want to set up a Ghostbusters franchise, a Ghostbusters universe, TV shows and stuff, and everything that Sony had planned to go after Answer the Call, you needed to do that. You needed to hand the torch from the old to the new. This weird hybrid remake, sequel, reboot thing that they didn't make any sense. It put people offside from the first moment. We saw them like, I don't know what I'm watching. And you needed some fan service in there. We're trying to sell like we've got no fan service, like it's a good thing, like. This film, Jason Reitman respected what came before. He respected his audience. He didn't need a dance-off scene, for example. He also, the horrible scene where Melissa McCarthy first tests the proton pack. When I was a kid, I fucking wanted a proton pack. Those were cool. And he's bouncing around doing physical comedy. I'm like, who thought that was funny? That's a terrible choice. Yeah. Treat the original property with respect. It's a little bit like we come to it again. I say it a lot, but when they started treating comic books source material with respect is when they started getting it right. When they started treating it like you would a Mario Puzo novel or something like that is when all of a sudden it started to click. And they started making really good. I don't think Paul Feig had any respect for the source material. I feel like the film shadowed over what the original films. And well, I'm not one of those people who went around going, oh, it raped my childhood or anything stupid like that.
Disney, what are you doing?
Well, wait, if you're going to make a film based on a beloved classic, and you basically go, well, you basically treat that beloved classic source material like it's something you stepped in, something to be made fun of, something to be, that shitty 80s stuff. Where do you see what we do? We're so much better now. Our improv physical comedy is so much better than the tightly scripted stuff that they had in the 80s. Like you treat it with some respect, it would have gone a lot further. It was kind of what I was thinking. Jason Reitman had some real love for the original source material, I think, and that came through in this film.
Well, I think that's the thing. Misidentity for Ghostbusters Answer the Call 2016, however you want to tagline it. I don't think it was a matter of no one working on that and having no respect for the original Ghostbusters movies, but to me it stinks of corporate fuck-uppers. It's like, oh, you know what's funny right now? These physical comedy movies. So let's bring some of that into it. And we've got these SNL ladies in. They'll be able to sell it, surely. Yeah, but at the same time, does it fit? Nothing in that movie fit. And it fit to me when I look back on it. And I watched it only a couple of weeks ago. It feels like a movie by committee.
This is what I'm trying to get at. So, like I said, I know Paul Feig is a talented writer and director. And he's got at least 3 stars who I know are capable of really great work. where did the speed hump come in that said, you know what would be really cool is we just completely ignored the original and just made it from scratch.
If you're going to do that, fine. You set that standard right at the beginning. You don't release a trailer, say 30 years ago, Ghostbusters, blah, 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 and then they disappeared. You just go in fresh. Don't mention it at all. Maybe later on down the line, you can bring it in if you've created your own identity for your movie and you find some intelligent way to connect it to it, sure. But this was like, it did kind of feel like, oh yeah,
it did feel like, if that's, I mean, so as I said, I don't want to go much further in this because we stuck the boots into this plenty of times.
Yeah,
there was a lot of people out there who've kind of gone, wow, you must hate women. I've had that conversation. You are a misogynist because you hate this film. As I've always said, there are many reasons to dislike this film that are not to do with sexism. There are reasons. There were sexist assholes who didn't like this film because of who was in it. Those guys that I noted are assholes and can be safely ignored. Whereas I think that by the same token, the only reason to dislike this film is because you're a misogynist or you hate women or you have a problem with women being in it, is maybe also not right as well. Like you can dislike it, like I said, for a lot of different reasons. And basically giving the finger to something I really, really liked, and kind of disrespecting it is, I think disrespecting it was part of a reason. And I think you can see a lot of the fan service and stuff that Jason Reitman got right. If they'd actually taken note about something in 2016, they might have had more success than they did, because people hated that film. And
so Siren
has an interesting point here.
Yeah, I think one of the big issues of the past 5-ish years is this need for nostalgia. It's been huge. We've fed into it, but there's prime examples like Ghostbusters movie that fall flat because they were simply money grabbing for the sake of nostalgia. 100% agree with you.
I do, and I would agree. Afterlife is exactly the same.
Yeah.
I wasn't asking for this. I didn't feel like we needed another one. I was quite happy to leave it dead.
Yeah.
But, if you're going to do it, you're going to do a lot better if you do a good job of it, and you've got to, I mean, it's one thing to go, we want to bring everyone on board, but you got to get the fans on first. If you haven't got the fans of your original on first, you're very unlikely to get enough. You're very unlikely to get enough neutrals on board to make up for them. And the fans are something kind of the opinion setters. So, this is, make no mistake, this film is a money grab every step of the way.
100%.
And it didn't need to happen, and I would have been quite happy if it didn't exist. But if I have to have a Ghostbusters sequel, this is the one I want, as opposed to what we got 5 years ago.
Following on from that comment, does my comment about Back to the Future now make some more sense to you? If
I don't want to put that energy into the universe. Like, I mean, I absolutely, I don't look. No, it doesn't, in the sense that, like, there is absolutely no way to make a good sequel to that film. That film is, they need to be left alone. It needs to be enshrined in legislation.
I could do it.
I don't want to. I will say this now. I will never pay money to see a Back to the Future sequel, reboot, TV show, remake, you name it. They will get not a cent out of me.
Oh, that is a hard line right there. And I think that's a good way to end our conversation on Back to the Future Afterlife.
Time for our sponsor?
I think it is time for our sponsors. And let me just make a note of the timestamp there. Jesus, we're already up to an hour.
Sometimes I agree. Some things should be left in the past. And Back to the Future will be left in the past until Bob Gale dies. The creator of the film has said he will not entertain a remake, a reboot, or anything of that nature. But when he passes away, who knows what his estate will do.
All right. So who are our sponsors this week, Travis?
Our sponsors this week are the 1990 ABC Kids Game Show Vidiot that used to air on the afternoon show here in Australia. I used to love this show. I wanted to be on this show so fucking badly, but they shot it in Sydney.
Now, don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, use hashtag no discount at checkout to get no discount for all of our sponsors.
Afternoon edition has called for controversy. Afternoon.
Well, it's MCMT coming through your TV, scratching through the dial on my radio. Hello, welcome to the afternoon show. Another big week ahead of us. Hope you had a good weekend. This week we have got a special presentation for you, a double episode of Degrassi High on the show tomorrow, so don't miss that. And also on the show later in the week, by popular demand, you guys requested that the New Kids on the Block documentary once again. We'll run that on 5:30 on Friday. But today on the show, we've got lots of things happening. Melissa is in to talk about her new album, Fresh, and we've got Video right now with special guest host from Home and Away, Matt Stevenson.
Idiot.
Hello. Woo! Good afternoon, hi. Welcome to Video. I'm Eden Gaha, and this is one noisy crowd. Oh, yeah, this afternoon we are going to find ourselves another champion video to put into the end of week playoff, and our noisy, funky audience is from Miller. Make some noise, Miller. Fantastic, yes. We're also going to meet our video special guest host, who this afternoon is an Australian television star. We'll meet him a little later on. But first of all, let's meet our vidiots and zap them onto the contestant panel. There they are, Tina, Wes, and Melanie. Woo! All right. Now, Tina, you have a very interesting hobby. You're into ancient Egypt.
Yep.
Yeah? Why is that? Is there any particular reason, or you just became fascinated by seeing it in books and things like that?
No, because they're different.
I usually ask people who their favourite band or actor is. Who's your favourite Egyptian god?
Iris.
Iris. And who's Iris?
She's motherhood god.
Motherhood god. Fantastic. Where's into basketball, mate?
Uh-huh.
Yeah? Do you play?
Sort of.
Where's, are you a good player? Are you a good basketball player?
I don't know.
You don't know. Is he any good? No. Not much good at all, Wes. So who's your favourite player? Who's your favourite basketballer?
Jordan.
Michael Jordan, Chicago Bulls. And Melanie, what sort of TV shows do you like watching?
Married with Children.
Married with Children. Anything else?
Degrassi High.
Degrassi High. Who likes Degrassi High?
Degrassi High and the clothing that we wore back in those days. Good God.
So that was it's a kids pop culture game show. I wanted to be on it so much. That is, the host there is a guy named Eden Gaha. You're probably not familiar with. That's what he was doing in 1992. Subsequently went on to be the executive producer of shows like The Biggest Loser, MasterChef in the USA, The Island of Bear Grylls, The Apprentice, Survivor, in the United States. So he's kind of a big deal in reality television.
Yeah, reality TV. He learnt how to farm young talent early, I guess.
Well, you see him trying to make those kids sound interesting in 1992, and I don't know, I'm not really good at anything.
I really know nothing. I didn't think Australia could make me cringe anymore, but I was wrong.
Oh, contraire. Challenge accepted, Siren. Tune in next week.
The contest has been laid down. Now, what should we talk about next?
I want to talk about Jurassic Park.
Yeah, okay. So I went down the nostalgia route somewhat and watched Jurassic Park and the Jurassic World movies, partly because I was having to walk around like a T-Rex, and it was fun just going, making really bad T-Rex noises. But also because we have got a new movie that is finally coming out later this year. And I realized something about the Jurassic Park, Jurassic World movies. None of them are particularly good.
It's a hot take. The first one's a classic.
No. The first one is the only one that can stand through the test of good. It is a classic, especially the John Williams score. It's just beautiful, tingles, love it. And that was the one and only movie out of all of them that really captured the childlike glee.
You're right. Yeah, so if you're talking about the sequels, I mean, the two sequels from the original sequels, Jurassic Park 2 and 3, are trash. Absolute trash.
And I wonder, looking back on them now and looking at what the franchise is now, if they are now no longer like the original Jurassic Park source material by Michael Crichton it's got more of a horror element to it. And there's definitely more of the focus of corporations on it. Like the character of John Hammond in the books, he's not a cute and cuddly Santa Claus like guy that we were presented with. He's much more nefarious, and that kind of aesthetic of a character is very prevalent in every single other Jurassic Park, Jurassic World movie. And now it's almost become a bizarre message movie about pro-life and pro-choice and the evils of corporate nature.
I'm sorry, I don't miss a memo. I don't remember there being a pro-life message in Jurassic Park.
Well, that's the thing, especially in Jurassic World. There's just this regular reminder of whilst these creatures were genetically created in a lab, that does not make them anyone's property. They are still their own sentient entities.
Oh, okay. We're talking about the new films here, right?
Yes.
I have not seen any of the new generation of Jurassic. Thing is, as you sort of know, the first one was really fucking good. Like a masterpiece, classic of all time.
Spielberg at the peak of his
power. And Lucas actually directed some of the second unit stuff on that film. Like Spielberg went off to shoot Schindler's List and left it to Lucas to finish. Like, I mean, like the guy hasn't got a great rep as a director, but he did Star Wars. Come on. He came up with Indiana Jones. Like, come on. Like, I mean, that's pretty good. If you're going to leave a film in the care of someone, leave it in the care of George Lucas is probably a decent way of going about it.
Yeah.
But the sequels, like I said, were trash. I never enjoyed them. There's nothing good about them. Cynical cash grabs. So, I mean, I kind of, again, a bit like Ghostbusters, was like, sorry, I never felt like I needed any more of that story. 3 was more than enough. So, a 4th film and a 5th film, just because it's got Chris Pratt in it, it never got me in the door. Should I watch Jurassic World?
Huh?
Should I watch Jurassic World?
No. Your jaded narcissism would just...
Narcissism?
I knew that would get a rise out of you.
I resemble that remark.
No, it's... They're entirely unnecessary, and while they are better, both of the new movies are better than Jurassic Park 2 and Jurassic Park 3. They still cannot hold a torch to Jurassic Park, purely because they forget the childlike delight of seeing the dinosaur for the first time. And Jurassic World, we are reintroduced to the world of Jurassic Park and the environment of Jurassic Park years after the disasters that took place in Jurassic Park 1, 2, and 3. And for a couple of years now, Jurassic World has been fully functional, operational. People have been safely going to see dinosaurs coming and going, and they, like any theme park, every now and then they bring out a new ride, bigger, better, badder dinosaur that they resurrect from the dead. And we are kind of stuck because none of the characters that we are presented with in these movies are gateways that we can latch onto for love of dinosaurs. In the first movie, whilst he hated technology, Sam Neill's character loved dinosaurs. He was just passionate about it. And so the older generation of audience could latch onto him. So like, oh yeah, I remember loving dinosaurs when I was a kid. That he was their gateway. And you still had that cynicist just there kind of with Jeff Goldblum's character. And then for the younger audience, you had Lex and Tim, who were particularly Tim, who is that just like overly passionate, like, I'm going to talk to you about dinosaurs until you cannot stand it and you are going to have to trick me into another car. Because all the other kids, young kids, I don't care who you are, as a young kid, everyone goes through a dinosaur phase.
I didn't.
Well, you were never a kid.
True, I came in this world fully formed. A bit like Nuclear Man in Superman 4. Just like bad movies and a strand of Superman's hair thrown into the sun.
There you go. Done. And that's the recipe for a Travis. But
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
In Jurassic World, we have the kid who played the kid in Iron Man 3, whose name I can't remember and I don't really care. He is supposed to, there's thrown away lines where they're saying, oh, you're supposed to be a genius or something, and he never does anything that's genius. I mean, his genius moment is where they're in one of these like gyrospheres that's supposed to be safe and impenetrable. Guess what happens? But they take it off road and they're like, oh, look, 4 dinosaurs. It's like, there's 5. It's like, oh, there's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like 5. And he's just counting the reflection of one behind them. It's like, wow, that's your genius moment? Okay, sure, whatever. But he's annoying. He's not a good gateway for the young audience to really get to engage. And then you've got the adult characters. Bryce Dallas Howard is a corporate shill. Don't think anyone's going, oh, yeah, I remember wanting to be a corporate shill. You're not going to empathize with that character. And then you've got Chris Pratt, who is trying to be a little bit modern animal lover, Steve Irwin-ish kind of character, but he doesn't go full Steve Irwin. So he's just... because every action hero has to have worked with the US Navy SEALs, he's a former Navy SEAL that now just trains raptors. Career progression.
Yeah.
It's a convoluted mess. Again, I said it with Ghostbusters Answer the Call of it being a movie by Community. This is another one of those. It's like, okay, so what do people want from Jurassic Park? They want the T-Rex. They love the raptor. They need to have those scares. Okay, so we've got to get good CGI and special effects in there. We should get some known actors in there to just, carry the movie along. Everything's done serviceably. And Colin Trevorrow, I don't know if he's a good director or not. He was supposed to direct the third of the Star Wars new trilogy and left. Creative differences there, and he decided to go back after missing the second Jurassic World movie. He's gone back for the third one. I don't know.
I think the answer is probably no. He's made one good film.
That's the Time Travel,
not guaranteed.
Yeah, and it's He
Look,
doesn't.
I mean, people like Jurassic World. It was 7 on IMDb. He
Yeah.
made a lot of money, and people
Yep.
enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm out of line. He's saying and I haven't seen it. So the only thing I've seen he's actually ever is Safety No Guarantees. So, but the rest of his stuff seems a bit half-assed. It's a little bit like Gareth Edwards, right? He made one good film, then he got Star Wars Rouge One, fucked that up, and we haven't seen hide nor hair of him since. They had to get somebody else in to come and fix it. Was it Paul Greengrass or something? Someone else they had to get in to actually fix the damn thing after he kind of made a mess of it.
Wasn't it Ron Howard?
No, it was Solo.
Oh, that was Solo. Yes, that's right.
I can't remember the exact. Someone came in to actually fix it. They had to hire someone to do reshoots and recut it and re-edit it, and it wasn't him. It wasn't that. But he's not him. Like, he's got to group them together because the Disney just started throwing these huge films at young filmmakers, which on the surface is great, but I think these were young filmmakers who'd made one good film. And
we've talked about it in the past of those indie darling directors who make a hit indie movie, and then suddenly they are offered the keys to the kingdom. Go off and make this. Like, whilst I really appreciate big companies putting their faith, at least cursorily, in independent filmmakers, those independent filmmakers probably don't actually know how to work in a corporate industry, and it is
a hell of a thing to take on.
It's a machine.
FYI, it was Tony Gilroy, by the way, who paid $5 million for 12 weeks' work to recut, re-edit it, and stuff. Rouge One. Sorry to Paul Greengrass, it wasn't you. But you're right. It's a skill to work in these kind of films.
But you just look at it right. Prime example. Independent success with the Cornetto trilogy, as well as the darling success of Scott Pilgrim. Tried to make Ant-Man. Creative differences. He couldn't work within the Disney machine, and that is what Disney is. Every single one of their movies, whether it's Star Wars or any of their Marvel stuff or any of their live action stuff, they have created these machines to make $1 billion. That's all they care about. They need someone who comes in, can fit that cog perfectly there, keep it all going, keep it under budget, hit that deadline, and maybe if they're really clever, put a little bit of their own flair in there. That's all that they want from their directors.
You saw the light shine on that a little bit last year with Black Widow. The first director they offered that film to before Kate Shortland said no thanks. It's basically she was told you don't have to worry about filming the action scenes. We'll get somebody else to do that. So I feel like you probably also coming from the indie world, you have zero control over what your film is. You are kind of very much told what to do, I think. So I wonder if that's Trevorrow's problem. He just, maybe Jurassic is he has a little more control. He feels a little more comfortable in that world than he did in the Disney world. Maybe.
But I just think that they still haven't. They've failed for 1993. I think the first Jurassic Park movie came out in 94.
93. Yeah.
93. Yeah. There we go. They have not been able to recapture the soul of that movie. They have gotten closer with these more recent two, but still, nah. They're cash machines, and that's it. Entertaining if you want something in the background that you don't really have to pay attention to.
Will you be checking out the new one?
I will, because I love dinosaurs. And the fact that they are really promoting the fact that they've got the original actors of Jeff Goldblum, Sam Neill, and Laura Dern all coming back in some way. I'm curious to see how that goes. And part of me, it's just because I loved the game when it came out on PlayStation, Dino Crisis. And the idea of just evolving the Jurassic Park, Jurassic World franchise to just end up being a Dino Crisis movie series would be just so much fun.
Well, yeah, maybe finally that video game movie we've been waiting for.
Yes, we hope so. One day that bet will pay dividends. What are you going to talk about now, sir?
Let's talk about the card counter.
The card counter. Okay, tell me about the card counter because I know nothing about the card counter.
And let me just say straight up, that is the perfect way to go into this film.
Okay.
Unfortunately, that's about to change for you, though. I watched this film earlier in the week, and I literally knew nothing about it except it starred Oscar Isaac, and it was directed by Paul Schrader.
Okay.
Those were two pieces of information I had.
Okay.
The card counter. Redemption is the long game in Paul Schrader's The Card Counter, told with Schrader's trademark cinematic intensity. This revenge thriller tells the story of an ex-military interrogator turned gambler haunted by the ghosts of his past. It does star Oscar Isaac as William Tell. That's not his real name, but that's how he goes. Tiffany Haddish as Lalinda. Tiffany Haddish. I feel like I know her from comedies mainly. I actually can't recall. Looking at her IMDb page, I don't think I've seen anything she's been in. But hey, I know the name. Ty Sheridan, probably best known for Ready Player One, plays Kirk with a C. And we also have a little bit of Willem Dafoe action in here as Major Gordo.
Okay.
The rest of the character, I don't think anybody else in this you're gonna know.
Okay.
So, the film, written and directed by Schrader, follows William Tell, Oscar Isaac, a gambler and former serviceman who sets out to reform a young man seeking revenge on a mutual enemy from their past. Tell just wants to play cards. His Spartan existence on a casino trail is shattered when he is approached by Kirk, a vulnerable and angry young man seeking help to execute his plan for revenge on a retired military major. Tell sees a chance at redemption through his relationship with Kirk, gaining backing from a mysterious gambling financier, Lalinda. Tell takes Kirk with him on the road, going from casino to casino until the unlikely trio set their sights on winning the World Series of Poker in Las Vegas. But keeping Kirk in a straight and narrow proves impossible, dragging Tell back into the darkness of his past.
Okay.
Now, straight up, I thought this film was an absolute masterpiece in a lot of ways.
Okay.
Particularly Oscar Isaac's performance, which I thought was exceptional. Like, I don't know when the Oscar nominations come out. They must be soon. But I would not be surprised at all to see Oscar Isaac's name up there getting a nod, because I think this is probably the performance of his career to date for me. Interesting though, I realized, I didn't know a lot of his stuff apart from Star Wars. And I think he did a film called Eastern Promises or something like not it. Anyway, a film Triple Frontier. Sorry, he did. Is the one I was thinking of. And that wasn't very good. I didn't realize he was in the X-Men though.
Yeah, he was Victor Ooze. No, Ivan Ooze. No, I mean Apocalypse.
Yeah, he got there in the end.
He just looks like Ivan Ooze from Power Rangers.
There you go. So he's in the Marvel Universe as well, but not the MCU just yet. So he plays a former military interrogator. He served at Abu Ghraib.
Side note, he already actually is in the MCU because he plays Moon Knight.
He is now, yes, of course. My bad. Forgot about that.
Yeah.
He was at Abu Ghraib, and he was trained in how to use enhanced interrogation techniques by Willem Dafoe's Major Gordo.
Okay.
He ends up being jailed for his involvement in what happened at Abu Ghraib for 8.5 years at a military prison. When he's released, he decides to take up his Spartan life, as it sort of notes, of being a semi-professional poker player. But as he described himself, he's an under-the-radar player. He plays for small stakes. He counts cards, which is technically cheating when you're doing blackjack.
That's kind of cheating.
Well, they're cheating as well, casino. So, I don't think anybody. Anyway, he plays small hands to avoid being, shut down and kicked out by the casinos he plays at. And we're not talking Casino Royale casinos, right? We're not talking, the big ones in Vegas. We're talking shitty little suburban casinos on like Indian reservations in the States. That's a common thing. I remember last time I was in San Francisco. Friend of the show, Patria, and I stayed in a hotel in a neighborhood that could best be described as a demilitarized zone. And we needed to go find somewhere that had somewhere to get something to eat. And the only thing anywhere near us, apart from a little convenience store that sold like chips and stuff, was a place called Artichoke Joe's Casino. And it was just in the middle of this crappy neighborhood. It was this casino. And I was like, that's odd. I thought gambling was illegal in the United States, but it's legal on Indian ground. So that's why Artichoke Joe's was allowed to trade. And
Artichoke Joe.
if you're ever in San Francisco, feel free to check it out. It was
Unofficial sponsor of the show.
it was something. It was something, all right. And maybe I had my backpack, and I maybe take it off and show them what was inside because they thought I was smuggling liquor in. I'm like, I was thinking like, oh, I think you're gonna check it for like weapons or guns or like, no. Have you got liquor in your bag? And I'm like, you've got people smuggling their own liquor into your casino? Wow, this place is classy.
Were you causing a travesty?
Oh. The travesty was when Petria wanted a proper coffee and they had to dust off the coffee machine and figure out how to use it, which was a bit of a production, believe it or not. So those are the kind of casinos. These are the kind of casinos that William finds himself in, playing, small hands. And he's at one of them, and he notices is giving as a convention on it, like a security convention, and giving a speech. He sees old Major Gordo, the foe, which he sits in for in a little while. And while he's walking out, someone hands him a piece of paper with his name and his number and says to call him. Which I'm like, it's a bit of a weird pickup, where to meet men is in a security convention. And it turns out that is Tyler Sheridan's Kirk. When he does actually talk to him later on, Kirk tells him who he is, and that Kirk's father had served under Major Gordo as well, and was someone who William was vaguely familiar with. And he had also committed those type of crimes. He had been one of the people who committed the crimes in Abu Ghraib. Well, I mean, they were crimes. So, and he had ended up killing himself due to the trauma that he'd been put through in being a part of what took place in Abu Ghraib. And he has hatched a plan to kidnap and torture and kill Major Gordo. This sort of triggers that sort of spark of human emotion in William, which you do not see very often. And it's a sort of, the synopsis noted, a real chance to sort of redeem himself here. And make do something worthwhile in his life to sort of to sort of make up for the crimes he's haunted by, but took place in Abu Ghraib. And so he takes Kirk under his arm and takes him around on the poker tour and kind of supports him. And it kind of almost takes a sort of a pseudo father-son dynamic between the two of them, or at least an older brother sort of dynamic between the two of them, as he tries to sort of direct Kirk onto a different path and away from the path of revenge. That sort of a show as the sort of story moves along, and William starts to really sort of realize something of his life. This is almost a turning point, and takes him into a brighter direction, away from sort of the the nothingness of his existence, a nihilistic existence he'd been living up to that point in time. He starts to form a relationship with Lalinda. He's very successful in trying to win the World Series of Poker. And the whole reason he takes on, because, as he sort of said earlier, he likes being an under the radar gambler. Why he's become an above the radar gambler is to attempt to win enough money in order to help guide Kirk away from his self-destructive path that he's on. But as sort of a conflict sort of arises from that, as Kirk seems to resist Williams, then the better angels of Williams' nature. And the ending is quite shocking. Quite shocking. This is a fantastic film, but I can see it. A lot of people. It's not got a great rating online. It's got a 6.3 on IMDb. Just for note, the Ghostbusters 2016 Answer the Call has a 6.9. This has a 77 Metascore. That I can see in a way why maybe this would annoy people. This is also a slow, talky film, and I kind of criticized my Own Private Idaho for being slow and talky, but I think this is a much better written film than something like that. It's not a lot happens for a long periods of time in this film, but I was just the characters that Paul Schrader's created here and the way they speak to each other. I found completely compelling, and I couldn't take my eyes off it. For those who are not familiar, and why am I keep referencing Paul Schrader? Why was his name in the title? Why were we making a big deal out of it? Paul Schrader is kind of a big deal, but probably not as a director. His best known work is as a writer. He wrote Taxi Driver. He wrote Raging Bull with Martin Scorsese. He has directed the odd thing here and there, but he wrote best known things, as I said, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, American Gigolo, Cat People from Mosquito Coast. He's a fantastic writer. He's done some brilliant. We worked again with Scorsese and Bringing Out the Dead, which in fairness isn't Scorsese's best work. He directed Cat People, American Gigolo as well. But he is not best known as a director. He is best known as a writer, but he has an extensive, filmography as a director as well. I think as a director, he makes a wonderful writer. I think it's one of those situations where I think we talked about it last year, where we've seen what's the guy's name? He wrote Being John Malkovich.
Charlie Kaufman.
Sorry, I can't believe I forgot his name. He's moved into directing. He directed that movie that was on Netflix last year, but the name escapes me right now. The horror film. I'm Thinking of Ending Things.
Yes, that's right.
Which was pretty good. But I think my takeaway from it was like where his best work has happened is when you have an incredible writer in Charlie Kaufman paired with a really great director like Spike Jonze, or the French fella he worked with on Eternal Sunshine, whose name escapes me right at this point in time. I can't believe I'm having a blank tonight. Anyway, I think Schrader's kind of the same in the sense that he's a competent director, but a fantastic writer. And when you pair a fantastic writer with a fantastic director, like Scorsese, who he has an ongoing relationship, and Scorsese is an executive producer of his film, you can produce something truly wonderful like a Taxi Driver or a Raging Bull. In a film like this, this is a fairly low budget film, I understand, and they probably couldn't afford a Scorsese.
Michel Gondry.
Sorry, Michel Gondry. My bad. I'm sorry. And maybe he's just at the point in time in his life where he just wants to tell his own stories rather than handball them to somebody else.
Yeah.
But he has created a really compelling set of characters here and a wonderful, cracking story that really kept me engaged and entertained. But in fairness, it's probably not something we haven't seen him do before. He's just kind of the films he does. If you go back to something like Taxi Driver, and to be fair, I'm not overly familiar with everything Paul's directed. I've seen some of it. It's a bit iffy, some of it. But if we go back to something like Taxi Driver, that's a good. It's 1976. That's over 46 years ago. But that's a story about a lonely guy, right? A lonely veteran too, who uses violence, in the end, becomes violent in an attempt to cope with the alienation from the world around him. I mean, there's a million different ways you can understand that film. It's a masterpiece. But what do we got here? We have a lonely ex-veteran who isn't using violence to understand the world, is alienated from the world around him, and is coping through, in this case, he's staying up all night playing poker, low-stakes poker, in shitty suburban casinos, as opposed to Robert De Niro was staying up all night driving, doing a shit job driving taxis around New York. And they're both fairly nihilistic, empty, burnt out men who, the world's screwed up and thrown away. And so I found myself making those comparisons between Travis Bickle and William Tell in his films, and I think they're fairly similar characters, and I think he's done that in other films as well. So if you're looking for something completely new and different here that Schrader hasn't done in his other films, you're not going to find it. But if you do something well, AC/DC have been making the same record for 50 years.
Talk about Ian Ricardo's and Alan Sorkin.
Do what you do it well, and he does it well in this film. I mean, he doesn't do it always because he has made some stinkers. But this one, is really great. So, look, I won't go on about it too much more. The performance, like I said, Oscar Isaac's great. Ty Sheridan, so it's pretty good. Tiffany Haddish, really quite good in a serious role here. This is not a comedic role. It's Willem fucking Dafoe playing the antagonist in a way. So, enough said. He's absolutely firing at all thrusters these days, Willem Dafoe.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he's probably only in it for 5-10 minutes. So don't go in this expecting the Willem Dafoe show.
Well, that's the thing. There's certain there seems to be a subgenre of movies where these kind of heralds of Hollywood come in for 5 minutes or less and steal the show. I'm thinking of like William Hurt in A History of Violence, and Ed Harris again in History of Violence and things like that. They're sort of like, you know what? I've just got this juicy little role for you. It'll take 2 days to film it. In and out, done, dusted. Oscar nomination. Cool.
Yeah, well, I don't know if he's get an Oscar nod for this, but I mean, he deserves an Oscar nod for anything this year. It's probably Spider-Man. He was great in that. But we've seen that before, I guess. But look, I said a lot of people found this film dull because it's talky and there's no explosions. Or maybe they just went into a name like The Card Counter. They were expecting a Ocean's 11 kind of,
maybe
romp. Or what was that? 21 was that poker movie with the college students playing poker.
Yeah. With the actor that we shall not name.
It's not really about poker at all. It's not really about cards at all. It's really just the paint, the coat of paint that's on this. I enjoyed the fact that aside from the great performances and the writing, was it tackled a topic you don't really see a lot these days, in the sense that this is a film that kind of deals with the way the Americans treated Iraqis in Iraq, especially in Abu Ghraib, which is kind of a story, when it happened, it was a huge story. People probably, if you're young, you may not be where you went around to hear about it, but it was a big deal. They very quickly glossed over that. We don't talk about that anymore. Interestingly, we don't talk about what they did in Iraq anymore. Maybe you hear a little bit about Afghanistan in the last 12 months because the Americans finally pulled out. Time for another Rocky movie that goes back to Afghanistan, by the way. That would be good. Rambo. Rocky goes to Afghanistan and fights the Taliban.
With these hands, I'm going to settle the disputes in the Middle East.
I'm going to Taliban you out of the thing. But the Iraqi wars, we don't talk about that one anymore, right? It was big there for 5 minutes, but we made a lot of films about it, and now go and sit in the corner.
Yeah.
But not Paul Schrader. He hasn't forgotten about it. And the crimes that happened at Abu Ghraib is a really fascinating sort of kickoff point for this character. And we have now a generation of people in that country, particularly because they spend a lot of them wherever they're, who are traumatized by their experiences in Iraq. And it's a little bit like we had this remember all the Vietnam films that came out all the way through the 80s when that was over.
4th of July, Rambo, all of that stuff.
Hasn't happened with Iraq.
No.
So I'm glad it's another person, or at least one filmmaker who hasn't forgotten about what took place over there.
Yeah. Excellent. Sounds like a solid recommendation. And where
I liked it a lot. If you like talky dramas with, then that's probably for you if you're looking for. It's not a date movie though.
What platform did you see this on?
It is out at the cinemas here in Australia, believe it or not. So I think if you're in Australia, it's playing at your usual art house kind of places. Cinema Nova in particular is still kicking around. It might be the only place actually here in Melbourne that's actually still playing it. I don't know if it's popped up on any of the streaming services just yet. Let me just double check here. I think it might be a little bit early, frankly. And no, it's not available on any streaming services just yet. So, gonna have to go to the movies.
All right. Let me just get that time code in there. 45, 44. That'll do. Lovely. So, should we talk? Do you want me to talk about Underworld, and then we just quickly, and then we can talk about Peacemaker and Boba Fett?
Sounds like a plan. I hope you're still here, Siren.
Yep, this is for you, Siren. The things that I do for people. So, Underworld. Underworld was a series of movies that was started by Len Wiseman. It was part of a bit of that wave of things, like there was around the same time you had like Equilibrium and some of those alternative sci-fi movies that came out that were mid-range budget with rising stars. Equilibrium was just at the cusp of Christian Bale becoming Batman and just taking off. Kate Beckinsale, this was just one of her big movies after being a bit of a British independent actress darling, and before a lot of plastic surgery and Hollywoodization of her entire body. It got some press because people boiled it right down to the crux of what the first movie was, which was essentially a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, but with vampires and werewolves, which isn't entirely inaccurate. But it has spawned 5 movies now in total.
Really? Wow, I had no idea.
So there's Underworld Evolution. Then there was a prequel one that goes into essentially the genesis of why the Lycans, the
Rise of the Lycans, I think it's called.
Yes.
Awakening and Blood Wars.
Yes, that's right. And interestingly, Michael Sheen. Michael Sheen. There we go. Michael Sheen is the kind of the muscled heartthrob of Rise of the Lycans. And it's just weird seeing him do that, especially now that he's become very settled in the British gentleman who's a little portly, curly hair on top. It's just weird looking back at this. It's like looking back at Leslie Nielsen when he was in Forbidden Planet. It's like, that's not the same person, is it? It's weird.
It's worth noting as well here that Kate Beckinsale, correct me if I'm wrong, was married to Len Wiseman. Is or was married to Len at some point in time.
Yes.
They are no longer. IMDb says they are divorced.
So it was during I think the first 2 movies that which incidentally are the only ones that Len Wiseman directed. I think he is executive producer for the rest of them because he still has
15 years.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Though I think what really needs to happen is, when was the last one made?
5 years ago.
God, I had no idea it happened. You know what really needs to happen is we need to get Kate Beckinsale and Len Wiseman together with the other husband and wife team who make horrible science fiction horror films.
Don't say it.
We need the Resident Evil Underworld crossover.
We do not want
and
those
Kate
teams.
Beckinsale together at last.
Oh God, that would be nightmarish. Apparently, though, looking into some of the information about Underworld, there were talks of that happening. There were also talks of Underworld having a cameo by Wesley Snipes' Blade, as well as various other franchises that they were kind of tying to this. It's a fascinating world, and they have a lot of lore in this world. But the problem is that the story itself, the movies, the acting, and everything around it that actually makes it a film just is not the sum of the potential parts that they have for this quite well thought out world of Lycans and werewolves, Lycans and vampires. It's interesting, an interesting what if. Like, what if this idea had been given to another director who had just had more talent to it, and they had treated it with more respect rather than it going very quickly down the B-C route of Hollywood second sons. It's just a weird one.
I hated it. I hated it. Although I know it's the first one has a 7 on IMDb. People liked it. I thought it was shit. Like I said, we wouldn't be partial to Kate Beckinsale in a skin tight catsuit as a heterosexual man. He was 25 when the film came out. Like, Yeah, I was down for that, and when I watched it, I'm like, no, sorry, that's not enough. This is awful, awful movie. Len Wiseman is a terrible director, and fascinating to see that Danny McBride co-wrote the original story.
Not that Danny McBride.
How many
It
could there
isn't.
be? Um,
It is a different Danny McBride. I remember when I was looking at the credits, I was like, "What the fuck, Danny McBride? The Righteous
there we go.
Gemstones?"
He seems to have done nothing else except these films.
Mhm.
It's a shame. And Kate Beckinsale is a categorically terrible actress.
Yes.
Like, she's never been in a decent film, period. Unless you rate this one, which I don't. So
No, I do not rate this one as a good movie, and it's certainly not a good performance for her.
yeah, when I can remember her from, she was very big in Pearl Harbor, which is again an awful film.
Mhm.
She was in Van Helsing in 2004, an awful film.
Bad.
So she was in The Aviator, but I think she was in it very briefly. So, but I guess that kind of undermines my theory. She's never done anything good, but she's not been in much. She was in the remake of Total Recall. Yeah, no,
She was quite good in Much Ado About Nothing in 1993.
Well, can't say I've seen that one. So
and
I
Shooting
will
Fish was quite good.
I will doff my hat to her British indie days.
Mhm.
We're getting long again. Should we? Sorry, if that wasn't as deep a dive as we would have liked on these films. I mean, there's a lot of streaming stuff out there. I don't know why you punish yourself like this, but should we talk a bit of Boba Fett and
Yeah, let's do that.
Peacemaker? So we are now up to episode 5, I think, of the Book of Boba Fett.
Yes, I think that's the one. It's the one that is a sneak preview of season 3 of The Mandalorian.
Yes, Return of the Mandalorian, it's called. I've seen a lot of stuff like the Mandalorian. It took the Mandalorian to save the Book of Boba Fett. Again, I don't understand what people aren't enjoying about this. It's not all explosions, but I'm thinking it's okay. It's probably not as good as the Mandalorian. And in fairness, the episode with basically being basically an episode of the Mandalorian shoved into the middle of the Boba Fett series is an odd creative choice, and it can be. The link back to the Boba Fett story is tenuous.
It's literally a 30-second conversation right at the end of the episode.
The synopsis is an unexpected ally emerges. Okay. This episode was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. So there's a connection back to
Jurassic World.
The Jurassic Worlds. So we catch up with the Mandalorian doing his Mandalorian shit. Swinging around a big sword, he took off Juan Carlos Esposito at the end of the last season. I can't remember the character's name. Darth Thingy Bob.
What's his name? Moff Gideon.
The Darksaber, which looks cool.
Yes.
But interestingly, he seems to be he can't really handle it very well. Trying to take down some
when you
goons.
fight against it.
He catches up with the they call the Armorer, and apparently the only other surviving Mandalorian in the universe. At which point they find out he's taken off his helmet at some point in the past, and they decide, well, there's only 3 of us left in the universe. Well, we better kill this guy.
Well, no, they don't try and kill him for that. They just
kind of kill him.
No, that wasn't about him taking off his helmet, because that revelation comes after the fight. The fight was about trying to win the Darksaber, because the other one that wasn't the Armorer or the Mandalorian, his house originally created it and he wanted it back. So he challenged the Mandalorian to fight, ended up losing, and that was the point where they said, like, have you ever taken your helmet off? And he cannot answer because he has. And then they go, yep, you're out of the club. Bye-bye. Excommunication.
It's like that moment like in Ghostbusters. When someone asks you, if you're a guard, you say yes. If somebody asks you, if you've taken off your helmet, you say no.
My response, if I was the Mandalorian in that point, is like, so do you sleep with your helmet on? That's a stinky helmet.
Nose, you need to take the helmet off. Like, I mean, maybe
sneezing is the curse of all Mandalorians.
Maybe this is a timeline where the unspecified virus of unknown origin just never went away, so everyone wears masks. So then the story then transitions from this showdown about him taking his helmet off onto Tatooine, where he's trying to reclaim. Where he's word from the junk merchant there that she has a replacement for the Razor's Edge. Is that what it's called? The
Razor Edge,
which is called
Yes.
also, I think, a cool AC/DC album. But the ship she has to replace it with is basically the Starfighter from Episode 1. Maybe it's not the Starfighter from Episode 1 that Anakin shoots down the trade envoy ship with, but it looks a lot like it. And then we have basically an 80s teen movie style montage of them fixing it up. At which point we find out the junk merchant. Does she have a name? I don't know what an actual character's name is, but actually has once dated a Jawa.
Yeah.
That information I did not require, but anyway. This is an episode full of Easter eggs, if you're a Star Wars fan. And they're all the way throughout, through the big pipe thing that they need to get the Starfighter working again is also a throwback to the original Star Wars, in addition to the Starfighter being built by hand for the Queen of Naboo. If you don't recognize that, well, are you really a Star Wars fan?
I liked the audio cues. We talked about them before. They actually, when they were doing Pimp My Ride, they were using a lot of engine noises from the pod race sequence of the number one. So it's like, okay, you know what? People liked the look of that Starfighter. People kind of liked the pod racing element. Let's merge those to one in a friendly montage and salvage those nice little bits. It's them, a prime example of Dave Filoni cherry picking the bits of the Star Wars universe that he wants and just going, yep, I'm going to save that little bit and go save that. And it's got something on it. Let's just bring that over here and clean it. That's what this episode was, and I really appreciated it. But why sandwich it? This is kind of a more egregious version of what they did with season 2 of Stranger Things, where they had the one episode all about 11 in San Francisco. And it's like, well, how does that tie in with anything? They did exactly the same thing here.
It is odd, but it was fun. So I give it a pass.
You shill. Disney shill.
It's funny, these guys. I was a bit surprised to find that people weren't liking this series. It's not as good as The Mandalorian. Interestingly, Boba Fett, for a character who people have adored for decades, isn't as compelling a character as this brand new one they came up with more recently. And I feel like, that probably is a black mark against the writing in this series, that this is a character people have wanted a series or a movie for a long, long time.
But therein lies the problem. The allure of Boba Fett was the mystery. We didn't know who he was. We didn't know anything about him. We just knew he was the one guy that stood up to Darth Vader. So like, he's no good to me, dead. And that was it. And it was like, okay, he's cool. Explaining anything about a character like that, you ruin everything.
Potentially, you're right. Potentially, there was no other way out of this than other than ruining the mystique. But look, I said, I'm enjoying the series. I think it's good. I'm looking forward to the next episode.
Yeah.
But he always seemed like kind of a badass.
Yeah.
And Tamira Morrison in this is kind of a bitch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I can see that criticism, but he doesn't do much. He relies on a lot of other people around him to do stuff for him. Like, Fennec Shand is kicking ass and taking names. How long till she gets her own series, really?
The check is in the mail, I think.
I would be sure about that. But I don't know why I'd be cool with that, because she's really cool. And I think who actually plays her in this? Ming-Na Wen is doing a fantastic job with the character. And she's overshadowing. In the next few episodes, we need some serious, badass Boba Fett action.
I kind of ominously from the start of this show, I've had the nagging feeling. It's the same sensation and sentiment that I had for the first series of Picard, where I thought it was going to be this slow boil to this really good denouement right at the end of the season where it just brings it all together and it's just really gut punch. And they fucked that up. I getting a bit of a whiff of that on this now.
Maybe, but in fairness, Jon Favreau and Nathan Filoni, the writers of this aren't Robert Kirkman. They aren't committed to the message or whatever it is that Kirkman's doing with that series. Like they are.
Robert Kirkman.
Kirkman is the poison that has destroyed Trek for me and a lot of other people. Favreau and co here, where they can maybe, as I said, there kind of been some missteps here and there. I don't think they've quite got the tone right. We need the badass. He haven't quite got that.
This is further evidence in my big canon that I keep bringing up for all of these streaming channels where they're creating their own content. Why the fuck are you sticking with these scheduled time slots of half an hour, 45 minutes? And there's just, if you need to have a short little 15-minute episode, do it. You are your own master. Just fucking do it.
Touche. Some of these episodes do vary a little bit in length, but I guess maybe there's some sort of research that says people want a predictable length of a show. But as I was saying, like, I have some issues with how some of the choices they've made here so far. But most of all, I like it. And as I said, I don't think they're in the same boat as somebody who has. It's like Kirkman's been given the keys to a beautiful car from, beautiful classic car from the 60s, like the one that Steve McQueen drove in Bullet, pristine condition. And he's gone, fuck this car and fuck everyone who likes this car. I am going to take it and drive it in the demolition derby because that's what you do with cars.
I'm sorry, you cannot have the quality of the Trek universe before Kurtzman was patchy. But it
was patchy, but then again, so I'm going to go too far down the rabbit hole of this, analogy here. But it was something that people adored. They adored it with its flaws.
In the same way that a lot of people adore Doctor Who. Yes, that's fair.
It wasn't. Those can't. They adored it the way it was, and he's basically gone, "Fuck it, I'm going to destroy it." He is the NWO. He's the NWO of the Star Trek universe, is what he is. He is the Hogan Nash and Hall of that.
To be fair, that analogy is very accurate because when NWO first appeared, they caused some interesting stuff over at WCW, just like the reboot of Star Trek that was actually promising, and then it went downhill because they stuck around for too long and kept on.
Discovery was the finger poke of doom of a Trek universe. So wrestling fans will know what I mean. Should we talk a little bit about Peacemaker before everybody has to go to bed, including us, because I have a job. We are now at episode 5 of Peacemaker as well, actually.
Yeah.
I think, if you up to date?
I am up to date, yes.
Episode 5 is Monkey Dory.
Scout the apparent hub for the alien food supply only to come face to face with a full-fledged invasion.
Meanwhile, Audie's attempt to sell out his son to the police is complicated by Mern's mysterious contact. So, as notes, we have sort of most of the team together off raiding the production facility in this one. And this is the one where they really synthesize into a team. And I really liked how it was done in this. And I don't want to go too deep in this again. I think people are probably getting sick of us jerking off over this show, but this show is so fucking good. It has no business, absolutely no business being this good.
Yeah.
And I put it on Facebook. It's funny. It's exciting. It's fucking disgustingly violent, and it's moving at the same time. But how do you do that? How do you have those 4 elements in a half-hour TV show? 40-minute TV show, really. But, who does that except for James Gunn?
Yeah. And I think that part of the real charm of this show is he wrote it super quick. If they had said, "Oh no, you know what? Let's just refine and tailor it and just fine tune it," I think it would lose a lot of its charm.
I think you're right, and he is also is a fine example of a studio getting the fuck out of its own way. Like
Mhm.
I have to
Mhm.
imagine that like was part of his deal was to go, hey, I get to do whatever I want, because who else would have greenlit him using Ratcatcher 2 and Polka Dot Man and Suicide Squad?
Yeah.
And I love the little references throughout the show to other obscure DC characters. Like in
Mhm.
this latest episode, John Cena's Peacemaker references working with Matter Eater Lad. And I'm like, that can't be a real thing. And you go, type it into Google and you're like, oh my God, there really is a Matter Eater Lad. Who thought that was a cool idea?
Someone, and for a brief moment, it was beautiful.
1962, right? Like, so he has gone deep into that
Mhm.
archive of DC characters and pulled out some real. Like last week, he mentioned, we talked about. He mentioned Dollman and
Mhm.
a couple other real
Man-Bat.
obscure Batmite and stuff like that. And like, I was like, it's almost like a DC an education in DC lore here. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
The other characters are really starting to coalesce around him as well.
Mhm.
His relationship with Freddie Stromer's Vigilante is brilliant, hilarious. Daniel
Mhm.
Brooks, I feel, is really starting to hit her stride as Leota. And really enjoying seeing Jennifer Holland's Amelia Harcourt started to find the heart in the team. Steve
Yep.
Agee really stood out, and he's John Economist in this episode.
Yeah.
And this is the episode he had to have with his bonding with Peacemaker,
Mhm.
and over the love of Hanoi Rocks. Hanoi Rocks. We've talked before about the how the soundtrack, and it's almost the resurrection of hair metal. By James Gunn is gone. It's been ignored and made fun of for far too long. It's time that somebody took us aside and said, you know what? There was some fucking great music that came out of that scene.
Yeah.
And here you go. I'm going to base an entire TV show around it.
Pretty much. Pretty much. I just love the show. I cannot wait for the next episode. I can't wait to see where this ends. I think it's been
In reference, we talked a little about it last week. It looks like there will be a season 2.
Excellent. I'm on board.
The news came out, I think, the day after our show last week, which of course, as usual, producers called it. But I think the story came out, I think it was a quote from James Gunn, I assume from Twitter, him saying, yeah, look, the studio basically, aside from a few crossing some I's and dotting some T's, brackets, me, this show is going to happen. So I read that to mean the studio wants to do it.
Mhm.
It's just a case of fitting it into his schedule with Guardians 3, which I think is being filmed as we speak.
Now, I think, yeah.
And I think there was also a hint that there would be another Suicide Squad character spin-off.
Yeah, there was talk about that. I can't remember who it was, but yeah.
I don't think it's actually been announced who it was. There was a hint that, like, well, yes, everyone would like to see Margot Robbie, but again, pretty busy lady, quite an in-demand actress. Could she really take the necessary time off to do, a TV series? Who knows? So another Suicide Squad spin-off series in the works. James Gunn recently told us. We're working on something else now, another TV show that's connected to that universe. Gunn told us, I can't quite say. In addition, says about a second season of Peacemaker, which recently dropped episode 5 today. There's a really good chance of that. We're the biggest show in the world right now. So that all sounds encouraging. The hint, I have no idea whether it means anything at all, was the article that I read about the second spin-off had a photo of Ratcatcher 2 in it. Now, that could mean nothing. It could just be the editors going, I really want to see a show about her. I have I don't know. I just don't feel like there'd be a spin-off series about Margot Robbie, because I'm sure HBO would love one. That she doesn't come cheap. And how does she fit into a schedule? She's a producer. She does a lot of stuff with that now. So I don't know that they could get Margot Robbie for something like that. I would same with Idris Elba,
Mhm.
kind of guy. Maybe he's going to be the next Bond.
Yeah.
You know,
I kind of expect it to be actually more to do with maybe having some more of the characters from Suicide Squad turn up and use it as like a backdoor entrance for like more of the girls from Harley Quinn's movie of like Black Canary and Huntress and that sort of those kind of guys, because I would love to see Mary Elizabeth Winstead continue Huntress. She was one of the very best things about a very, very tepid Harley Quinn movie at best. And just to see her actually be able to fully embrace the role, much like John Cena has with Peacemaker in a show. Yes. But I think there was something about Mary Elizabeth going over to the MCU for something, or for a new Star Wars movie or something along those lines. She just got pegged for one of the big franchises. So
time will tell. Ratcatcher kind of makes the most sense because she was a really breakout character from that film. I don't know. Polka Dot Man would make sense as well. He was an interesting character in that. And there was quite a bit of depth to that character as well that he gave in the film. So one of those would probably be my guess. I don't see King Shark film working per se.
Yeah. She has been cast in the Ahsoka Star Wars TV series as someone.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm always glad to see Mary Elizabeth in things. She's one of my favorite actors.
Yes.
Horribly underused in the pathetic Harley Quinn film. Tepid was generous.
Well, on that note, I think we'll come to the end of the show. We just busted over the 2-hour mark again because apparently that's our thing. Thank you so much, Siren, for joining us. And thank you for piping in with some of your thoughts as well. You were welcome to do that. We encourage it. We have talked about My Own Private Idaho, which was this week's chain movie. I have picked Ripley's Game as our link in the chain. We talked about Ghostbusters Afterlife with more of the spoilers. So again, post-podcast reminder of that. I didn't even change that. We talked about Jurassic Park, Jurassic World series, Card Counter, which sounds like a fucking awesome movie, frankly. Talked about the Underworld series, and finally finished up with updates on Peacemaker and the Book of Boba Fett. Now, don't forget, you can like, share, and subscribe. We do really like that when you do it, because it just makes my heart go all fluttery. Next week, I am going to be talking about my boy, Guillermo del Toro, his latest movie, Nightmare Alley. I'm going to check that out. I have plenty of time to watch it, and I am excited for it. It looks good. So, yes.
Great cast, too.
Yeah. It looks like a delightful blend of Shape of Water, Pan's Labyrinth, plus the stereotypical Guillermo del Toro insanity that is just divine.
And we'll be in the same room together. So,
yes, we will, which, would just be strangely awkward in social distancing. It would just be right on the edge. Like, hi. Hello. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for supporting the show. And incidentally, last week's show is going to be up on podcast services later tonight. And then this one will go up on Sunday. But don't forget, you can always go to twitch.tv/thefriedbrain to watch it at any time after it is live, or youtube.com/armchairproducers. Thank you very much. Good night.